Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Joining us now for an exclusive conversation, I'm happy to say, Admiral Rob Bauer, chair of the NATO Military Committee. Admiral, a pleasure to have you on the program. We thank you so much for joining. Let's start there. It's been a wild week in terms of U.S. politics. As we just said, President Trump has made some pretty strong comments, even threatening to leave NATO altogether. In that scenario, who is best positioned within the alliance to step up?
Well, I think, good morning, Kriti. I think that what happens in NATO is important for the U.S. So I think in that sense, it is in the interest of all the allies, including the U.S., that the alliance is strong. It is strong at the moment, stronger than ever, actually. And we talked, the ministers of defense talked yesterday about, for example, the increase in the budgets and the fact that so many more nations now step up, deliver on the 2% pledge. It's now 18 nations out of the 31. So that is moving in the right direction. That is not money for NATO. The money that we're talking about here is money that nations invest in their own armed forces to make their own armed forces stronger so that they can defend themselves in accordance with Article 3 of the treaty. And I think that is all happening. We have great now plans in place. We're working on the executability of all that. It requires more people, more capabilities, more military training. And all that was discussed during the Defense Ministerial. There's a lot of work to be done, but I think NATO is in a great place at the moment, and therefore I'm not really concerned about this.
Well, Admiral, talk to us a little bit about that 2% pledge here. At the moment, the United States makes up over 2/3 of the military expenditures at the moment. Given the growing risks from Russia in particular, and perhaps others in the future, could you see that 2% pledge start to see any sort of pressure on the upside?
Well, the agreement in the Vilnius summit was a minimum of 2%. And actually, these discussions on the money is not on the money itself. This money is necessary for making these plans I was talking about executable. So to deliver on all the things that we need, as I said, more readier soldiers, more capabilities, more training, all that requires more money, and therefore the discussion was on a minimum of 2%, and therefore there is a recognition in the alliance that we might need more than the 2%. That's why the formulation was what it was. So if we need more money, as we see in a number of nations already, the nations are investing more in their armed forces. Poland is a good example, the Baltic states, of course, other nations as well. So that is why we see the ramping up in the funding, because the nations understand that they need to invest more in their armed forces.
Good morning to you, Admiral Bauer. So the European nations are stepping up, you say, and spending more on their own defence. And these comments that we hear coming from the US political campaign, of course, come at a time when you're trying to project an image of resilience and deterrence against Russia. How much do these comments complicate your ability to stand firm in the face of Russia?
I didn't hear your question completely because of the traffic behind me, but if you mean how ready is NATO, is that the question?
Yes, I was asking how much it complicates your ability to be strong in the face of Russia when we hear comments such as those made by former President Trump.
Well, the unity in our alliance is one of our biggest strengths. The fact that we stand for each other, with each other, in the face of an adversary, and I think that is extremely important. We've shown that when the war the full invasion in Ukraine happened. Within an hour, the North Atlantic Council had an agreement on the things we had to do. It was not just a statement. 40,000 troops came under command of the Supreme Allied Commander Europe. Airplanes, hundreds of airplanes were in the air. Hundreds of ships were at sea under command of NATO. And that in itself was an enormously powerful message for Russia to make sure that they understood that NATO will respond when we are seeing that threat rise. And I think that is what we did as an alliance. So I think the fact that we did what we are here for is actually the reassurance you are talking about.
Admiral, the money matters, of course, and then there's what you're able to do with it and produce with it. Do you think we need to see more incentives for more military production to take place within Europe?
Absolutely. Across the alliance, in the US, in Canada and in Europe. We need to increase defense production to a great extent. We see that the Russian production in the Russian defense industry is being ramped up much faster than all of us held possible. The economy in Russia has turned into a war economy. What we need to do is to make sure that we are able to continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes, with whatever it takes. And then the second thing is we need the capabilities and the ammunition for ourselves as well to be more ready. So what we have seen is a longer discussion in Europe on not only are we going to do this, but also convincing financial institutions to invest in defense. This is the liberal economies that we are living in. So this is about convincing the investors to make sure that all the regulations are in place to build a new factory. So there's now some good examples in Germany where a new Patriot factory is going to be set up. There's a new factory for artillery ammunition in Germany, in Denmark, in Finland. So things are happening. It took a while. And we need to continue doing that, ramping up the industrial production, convincing the financial sector it is ethical to invest in defense.
Well, speaking of Ukraine and particularly in the support there, Admiral, I'm curious about how you're assessing their progress on the battlefield and where else outside of Ukraine you may see the risk spilling over to from Russia. Give us a little bit of a status update if you can.
We don't see a direct spillover in terms of a conflict with other nations or with NATO. It is very difficult at the front line in Ukraine. The new commander of the armed forces in Ukraine, General Syrsky, said so himself yesterday. The front is heavy fighting. It's amazing how many lives the Russians basically accept in this battle. As I said, the Russian defense industry is ramped up, so the Russians have more artillery ammunition at the moment, which they are using heavily. They are using a lot of soldiers that are being killed in large numbers. It's amazing. So it is a difficult time for the Ukrainians, and therefore it is extremely important we continue to support them with everything that they need, and for as long as it takes. So that is what we need to do, and I think if you would have asked in the Second World War after 2 years on a number of allies, how are things going, then at that time it was difficult as well. So we didn't start to support Ukraine because it was going to be easy, but because it is necessary.
Admiral, you're talking about Russia's growing defense capabilities as well. Just in the last 24, 48 hours of the United States, there's been talk about Russia's military capabilities in space, potentially targeting satellites as well. NATO has come out and said that 50% of the satellites around the world are owned by NATO allies. It helps with things like missile detection. I don't need to tell you this. How seriously are you taking that threat? Have you been briefed on it? What is NATO's line?
NATO will look into every threat that we're facing, 360 degrees. That is on land, at sea, in the air, in cyber, and so also in space. And that's everything. I'm not going to speculate on this. So we are looking at this, of course, as we are looking at all the other threats that are around us.
Admiral Bauer, thanks very much for joining us. Rob Bauer, NATO's chair of the Military Committee.